What it means for me then is it's it's about it's about giving as much as you take. It's about uplifting. For me personally, it's about uplifting other people and helping. For my stance in all of this is about how do I help people make that connection to themselves and help them then elevate through their own special gifts. Again, what that special and gifts really means is impossible for me to answer, because only you can answer it or I can answer it for me. So for me, it's ever since I was a young boy, really, um, and human connection was hugely important to me, and I, I I've I've been brought up in a business world where human connection is supposed to be at the front, but the reality of the matter is human connection was just a facade, how do you say it, for profit. And I work in the finance industry, or I used to. Uh, and I think I've seen this divergence away from human connection towards how do we just make it's this whole point of coming back together, standing side by side, and allowing each other to be vulnerable enough to share what it is that we aspire to do and what we worry about that might stop us from achieving those things.
Yeah.
And I think once we become more vulnerable and become more open to one another, because spaces become safer, and I think that's one of the big challenges at the moment is what space is actually safe. And I think people worry about that deeply without, it sounds very dramatic, but I do think it's a very deep concern for people is what is actually safe. Is it okay to share my vulnerabilities? And in the corporate world, the billboards are saying yes, but the experiences people are having are saying no. So it's kind of there's this mismatch and shift away from where we should be versus you know where we're aspiring to go, or where the world is versus where we're trying to get to. And I think, and the crazy thing about all of this is on a very basic level, on a person level, we're all really striving for humanity's success. And this is the crazy thing is actually when you strip it all down, we all agree until you put business in the way and things, let's call them, I don't know, circumstances or context or whatever you might, however you might describe something, when you put it in the way of a human to human conversation, the human to human conversation falls first and the context wins. And if you then relate that to business, profit wins above all, um, which is why you see so little um, purpose before profit type businesses or non-profit organizations and that and people genuinely trying to do good in the world, um, and lots of again, another challenge to this is lots of organizations have said they've been doing good in the world, big charities doing great things in the world, and you go to the ground where those good things are happening and nothing has changed in 20, 30, 40, 50 years. So people are getting rich whilst the world is genuinely getting poorer. And I think there needs to be a movement, or we need to make this movement. And RFU, I think, is a wonderful thing because for me personally, sport is a lifesaver. So I have a number of health conditions um, that without sport, I don't know how short my life would actually be, because of so I have type 1 diabetes and I've also had cancer twice. I think sport really has been the bit that holds it all together. When I'm injured or unable to exercise for a couple of weeks, my whole world feels like it's falling apart. And I think sport really creates positive emotions, and it helps people frame their minds in a way that opens them up to talk about this kind of stuff. And so I think Ride for Unity is a great conduit for those discussions to be had and to start. And then once we're in the conversations, I think the movement will spread naturally, because I've never met a human being that doesn't want human beings to succeed. It's just there's barriers in the way called business, or called, personal or what pressure, political pressure, power. You put politics and power in the way, things fall apart. And it's how people navigate those things. And the biggest challenge that Ride for Unity has is bringing humanity closer together. And rather than say humanity, let's say bringing human beings back together, and actually bringing them back to their campfire. Let's take us back many hundreds of years ago, when communities sat around campfires and did whatever they did in very basic, rudimentary ways that we'd call them now. But that's the greatest gift that humanity gave us, was connection. And I think, for me, Ride for Unity is about how do we break down some of those barriers that have been created in the world through human connection is fundamental. How do we survive alone? That world doesn't exist in my mind. Or, okay, I would survive, but it would be a horrible experience. Because I think human beings, we're so unique in the sense that we're not like any other organism, that we emotionally spark new perspectives through each other. And I think that's the piece. It's more, I think it's the perspectives we generate within each other that change the world in front of us. And I think that's that the world doesn't exist in 5 years' time. We're creating it now. And I think that's the other point, is we create the things that are happening. We created today 5 years ago through media, conversations, technology, whatever it was. So I think through conversation, through bringing it back down to a human level where we all thrive, I think that's where you start to see the world as a different place, more humanly connected in 5, 10, 50 years' time. It's kind of something that's really close to my heart as well, that people are special, and I think we should remember that. And I think when we, as people, when we understand what our uniquenesses are and what makes us special, then we can make our best contribution in the world. And I think that's the piece. That's the bit that connects things. And I think we're lost as a whether we call ourselves a race or an organism or whatever we want to do. I think we're a bit lost. We're lost in winning, and we're lost in driving economics continuously up. We're lost in this advent of technology coming in. And I think we need to strip back all the layers and see people as human beings again, and really delve down into what makes us individually special, and then make contributions. So there is a lady called Imka, who's part of, I don't think there's anybody in the world that doesn't know, or anybody in the UAE especially, that doesn't know Imka. Certainly in the cycling world, she's a superstar. And she heard about an event I was doing on Jebel Jais mountain, which is where we'll ride up as part of Ride for Unity, where I did what we call a triple Everesting. So that meant riding up and down Jebel Jais 21 times, covering just under 1,000 kilometers, 27,000 meters. So the height of Everest 3 times. And then it took me about 57 hours with three hours sleep. And Imka heard about this online, and she reached out to somebody that I knew who connected us together. And then she joined. She brought an ice bath, and I'll always remember it. There's a picture of me inside the ice bath. It's actually a wheelie bin filled with ice, and my little head sticking out of the top. And after the event and everything died down, Imke introduced me to Leah, and then we had a conversation, and she liked my story, and I liked, you know, the vision for Ride for Unity and what it's trying to do. And well, if I can invest some of my time to bring some good through this, then you're welcome to have my time. On a personal level, there are some incredible people who are fighting their own personal challenges every day for survival, and they live from the outside a very normal and successful life. And I think spending time in an environment with those people and listening to their words of wisdom and and really and getting their view on how they deal with challenge or trauma and that kind of stuff is something that I'm really interested in as a person, and thinking about trauma, and also telling the story of Ride for Unity. So it's two things. So personally, being in touch with people that are hugely inspiring, and I think inspiring from that perspective of, that they're thriving when many people in the world would have just buried themselves and given up. And I think from that perspective, then the second point for me, from an outside perspective, is about sharing this thing called human connection, and really getting together. I want them to know that they're coming to a place where a group of people are trying to break down barriers to success between one another. And again, to be vague as possible, I think context is important. So I think barriers to success, whether that's I'm struggling with figuring out how to make a connection to somebody I want to make a connection to, or whether I have a business problem. I think those contexts are developed in individuals, and Ride for Unity will be about helping people with the ideas around resilience and how to build resilience, so they can then take those lessons and apply them to themselves in whichever way that they mean to, for them to get personal success in their context. I think the people they've brought together now, and I think the people that are in Ride for Unity are all successful people in contexts or environments that wouldn't necessarily promote success as a natural pathway. If you're living in the UK or the US or somewhere like that, and you're I don't know, you're born into middle class, you're going to have a reasonably successful life. But I think some of the people on Ride for Unity are not necessarily born with that same privilege, have gone through or are dealing with contexts in their life that make life extremely demanding, yet they're still thriving. And I think they've got lessons that they can share with people. And I think that's the bit that makes it unique. It's not just a band of people saying we want human beings to connect more closely together. It's a group of people who have been through the wars. Whether wars is the right word to use, to be honest, but in the context of difficult situations and scenarios, and they're thriving. And I think that's the bit. Resilience in each person has a story of resilience of their own, and it's unique. It's honest. It's everything. Kind of, it should be. And you see many of these movements where it's just somebody feels like they should make a movement, and they don't necessarily have an experience to draw on other than they can see it happening in the world, and that's great. But I think the uniqueness about Ride for Unity is that all of its people have something that is that they're dealing with, but they're still thriving as humans. So how they describe their special will be, so somebody would say, Carlo is on my mind because I saw a picture of the video of him, and somebody would say, oh, you're so amazing being able to carry this, but that's probably nothing to do with what makes him special. That's just the context of his life. And I'm really interested to actually learn and listen to how he experiences the world and some of the strengths he draws on to actually make it through every day. It's got nothing to do with the canister of the oxygen on the back. That's just the context. It's this, but there's so much deepness in there that's special. And I think that's the bit about, and that's why it can't be described from a third person, because I have absolutely no idea about the vulnerabilities, about the dynamicness, about the emotions that you experience on a day-to-day basis. So I can't put words around it for you. You've got to tell me yourself, and then I try to get your drift. I think trauma, we've put this title on something called trauma, which means in the greater scheme of things, it means I had cancer, or I've been psychologically abused or physically abused, or something big, okay, contextually big, and when you put something side by side. But the reality is, I think trauma exists for everybody in their own context. Whether you've missed a deadline, whether you have a time management problem, whether you have a boss that's on your back all day, every day, trauma exists everywhere. And this is the ride for resilience is beautiful, because if trauma exists in the context for you, that if let's start calling it trauma, not because we want to make these things deeply psychological and everybody needs counseling to get through it, but let's call it trauma, so we get back to that point of how do I build resilience so I can deal with challenges that I face in the world. And those challenges can be, I miss deadlines, I've got an overzealous boss who's micromanaging me, or I've got a target that's down there and I think I'm going to miss it. These are all traumatic experiences for people that aren't seen as trauma. And I think people fall down when they miss these traumatic experience, or this traumatic experience happens to them, and the resilience is missing. People struggling to bounce back. And I think that's the piece, that's a really strong piece in this, that it's how, and this is where the connection to some of the other riders is, they've had some deeply defining traumatic experiences, and they're still living a thriving life. Okay, so this person, I think it's Carlo, is riding up Jebel Jais with an oxygen tank on his back of his bike, and we'll leave it to him to tell that story. Why can't I recover from missing a deadline? Why have I suddenly become a planner when that's not naturally who I am? It's how we respond to all of life that's important, not the fact that I had exposure to this or I've had diabetes for my life, or I had cancer, and these were big life-threatening experiences. I think we need to get to a point where we start seeing resilience as a core component of human success. And I think through that resilient model, then we will naturally get more human connection, because people will not be so afraid to fail. People will be more open to expand. And I think through those two things alone, people will be more willing to connect and talk. And I think that's where we need to, and talk without, what's the right word? Talk talk with intent for each other's progress, not with intent that I want my exposure to grow, but I'm not really bothered about yours. That intent can't, if that intent exists, relationships won't grow. We have to be giving and taking in close to equal measures for, again, humanity to grow. I hope that um, through Ride for Unity that I can help just one person. I'd like to help everybody, but if I could only just help one person, it would help them realize that generally speaking, it's the perspective that they've taken is holding them back. And success is only around the corner. They just need to change their perspective.